Good morning, friends, and welcome to our online service at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Stony Brook. My name is Maureen Shaman, and I am happy to be here with you this morning as your worship associate, along with our guest minister, the Reverend Emmie Arnold. Reverend Emmie is a newly ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church. She has worked as a chaplain at various hospitals in New Jersey, Minnesota, and New York, and as communications director at First Presbyterian Church of Glen Cove. Outside of doing ministry, she loves to spend time with her family, friends, and partner, write, cook, and travel when that's possible. She will start working as per diem chaplain at New York Presbyterian Queens at the end of the month, which she is very excited about because it's in her own neighborhood, and she believes that caring for others begins at home and spreads outward. She's doing various editing jobs and preaching gigs and loves getting to meet new people and congregations, even if it's not in person. Our Director of Religious Education is Deb Little. Our religious education team is continuing to hold classes for children and youth this week. Classes are meeting by Zoom. I want to offer a special welcome to any of you who are with us for the first time or who still feel like newcomers. We're glad to have you here with us. And since our services vary from week to week, we hope you will return several times to get a true sense of who we are as a community of faith. Unitarian Universalism as a living tradition has commitments to freedom of belief and orientation toward inclusion, interdependence, and justice. You can find additional information about the principles we strive to live by on our website at UUFSB.org and our denominational website at UUA.org. We welcome those of all ages, abilities, and identities who are searching for spiritual community. So that we can reach you and invite you in, please click the link that'll be in the chat now to fill out a visitor's contact info form. And at the end of our service, there will be a link for you in the chat where you can sign up to receive our weekly newsletters and be informed about all we have going on. At the conclusion of our service, you will all be brought into view so you can unmute to meet and greet. We are so glad you are here with us, and we look forward to getting to know you. We will forego the small group chats this morning because of the town hall meeting. So that is the first announcement. Today at 12:30, the Racial Concerns Committee's proposed 8th Principal Task Force is holding a town hall meeting. This is your chance to learn, ask questions, and express your concerns. So following the service, take a break to stretch, eat, and whatever else you need to do to take care of yourself, and then please join us. The Zoom link is on our website at uufsb.org. Second, please do not forget our 2 online automatic fundraising options. From our website, click on the green Support UUFSB button in the upper left corner, and then follow the links either to serve.org for beautiful handmade crafts, kitchen and home goods, or to Amazon for everything else, and UUFSB gets a percentage at no cost to you. You can also go right to amazonsmile.com and choose UUFSB as your charity of choice. You can see there that the fellowship has received over $400 as a result of our doing this, and it could be so much more if everyone made sure every Amazon purchase were made through Amazon Smile. I also want to acknowledge the passing from his physical form, the Zen Buddhist master and activist Thich Nhat Hanh, who reminded us to be mindful of where we are at every moment. If we are not fully ourselves, he said, truly in the present moment, we miss everything. So please let go of all of your worldly concerns for a while and anchor yourself in this moment.
Let us enter the sacred space of worship together with the sounding of the morning bell.
We light our chalice this morning, grateful for the love that we experience in this beloved community. May the flame light the way for all who seek such abundance.
Hi, everyone. As I've kindly been introduced, my name is Emmie Arnold. As we continue to enter into a time of contemplation and worship and being together, I thought the poem Wild Geese by Mary Oliver might be very resonant to some of you who have been wondering where we belong in the place of the family of things over the last 2 years. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. And please sing along with hymn number 18, What Wondrous Love Is This?
Is this, oh my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul? When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down. When I was sinking down, sinking down. When I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round. Oh my soul, oh my soul, friends to me gathered round, oh my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend, with thanks unto the end, I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end, I will sing.
Oh, many thanks to Peter and Dee Dee for that beautiful recording. Let us take a moment to reflect on the ways in which community lives in our individual hearts. We will hear some words, then have a minute of silence, then sing together hymn number 55, Dark of Winter, recorded for us also by Dee Dee and Peter. Henry Nouwen is the 20th century Dutch Catholic priest, professor, writer, and theologian that Reverend Linda Anderson mentioned last week when she was discussing Bell Hooks's philosophy of love. He says, "Community is first of all a quality of the heart. It grows from the spiritual knowledge that we are alive not for ourselves, but for one another. Community is the fruit of our capacity to make the interests of others more important than our own. The question, therefore, is not how can we make community, but how can we develop and nurture giving hearts?"
Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will, ease my mind profoundly, and then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal. Gentle darkness, soft and still, bring your quiet to me. Darkness, soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more clearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me, and then my soul may hear a voice, a still soft voice of love eternal. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
It is our spiritual practice to engage in the work of love and justice making by sharing our Sunday collection plate with an organization that does good work in the world. I want to repeat the quote by Bell Hooks, which June used last week. Through giving, we develop the mind of gratitude. Giving enables us to experience the fullness of abundance, not only the abundance we have, but the abundance in sharing. In sharing all that we have become more, we awaken the heart of love. Our shared plate recipient for the month of January is Honor Our Indigenous Ancestors. This is a local Long Island organization that includes members of the Unkachog, Shinnecock, Montucket, and Matinecock nations. Their goal is to protect the graves of Indigenous people from excavation. New York is one of the only 4 states that do not protect grave sites located on private property. The organization has been working with the Sylvester Manor Burial Ground Project to conduct an archaeological study of the Afro-Indigenous burial ground located there. Projects such as this will enable us to tell fuller stories, histories, and traditions of the Indigenous peoples of Eastern Long Island. The organization also advocates for the passage of a state law that would protect unmarked grave sites and establish a Native American burial site review committee. Your contributions are accepted with gratitude.
Instead of cursing the darkness, light a candle for where we're going. There's something ahead worth looking for. And when the light of time is on us, we will see our moment come, and the living soul inside will carry on. It's a chance to give new meaning to every move we make, through the caverns, in the caves where we come from.
Light of dawn is on us, we will see where we can be, and the ancient ones can sleep an easy sleep. In the hallways of the ages, on the road to history, what we do now will always be with us.
It's a chance to give new meaning to every move we make, in the caverns and the caves where we come from. Instead of cursing the darkness, light a candle for where we're going, 'cause there's something ahead worth looking for.
When the light of time is on us, you will see our moment come, and the living soul inside will carry on.
Light a candle in the darkness, so others might see ahead. Light a candle in the darkness when you go.
What a lovely thing it is to begin a morning with music. And my intention here with my community reflection called Community, Keeping the Flame Alive During a Pandemic, is to indeed light a candle in the darkness and to have each other light each other's candles. And so as thoughts come up during this time, please feel free to leave them in the chat. Maureen and Ellen will be reading your reflections during a time of sharing after each part of my reflection this morning. I'm going to split this time into 2 parts, followed by sharing after each part. One where I talk about the hardships of community that I've experienced during COVID, and 2, sort of my long-term lessons that I've learned from living in a pandemic. So I was in Minnesota when COVID began, and my partner and my family and my home friends were all in New Jersey. But I was living in a really cool living situation over in Minnesota that had brought such community and such joy to my life for the past 6 months of living there. It had been basically the equivalent of an adult dorm where people came from all over the world, and it was rented by the month. And so you'd have people who were at Mayo Clinic for a 3-month gastrointestinal medicine rotation or a research fellowship or whatever it was. And so like many of my housemates, I was there doing education, and there were actually 60 of us in our own little bedrooms with our own little bathrooms. But the best part about living here was that we shared a kitchen together, and we all got off work at pretty similar times most days, and we'd just sort of find each other in the kitchen after work. And we might spend 2 hours there without even thinking about it, just huddled over basically an impromptu potluck of everyone having cooked their own dinner from their own culture and country. And this was one of the most special parts of living in Minnesota. And as you might imagine, the joy of living in a very large house quickly extinguished when COVID began, because all of a sudden we were having to think of things like bubbles and the way our bodies affected the world. And unfortunately, my housemates were like, well, we live under the same roof, so we are all one bubble. And unfortunately, 60 people do not a bubble make. And so I had to make a very costly decision overnight in order to protect me and to protect my patients who I was serving as a chaplain resident. I basically had to cut myself off from my community overnight and stay in my room and go to the kitchen only at sort of off hours, because I just felt like there was such a high risk if I continued going about as I had gone about. And so it was a devastating loss to experience. And my family in New Jersey and New York City were going through a very tough peak. Minnesota hadn't been hit as hard yet. So I was hearing horror stories from back home and wondering when it was going to creep into the hospital I was working at. And one of the most meaningful tools of a hospital chaplain is meaningful touch. So like putting your hand on someone's shoulder or in their hands or something like that with the permission of the patient. And understandably, that got banned in order to keep each other safe. And so not only did I feel very stressed out, but I also felt like one of the best ways that I know how to comfort people professionally was gone. And so in my last 3 months there, I had 2 meaningful physical contacts. One was my friend's little daughter who came up and hugged my legs, and immediately I freaked out, but then realized my legs were not that close to my mouth. And so I probably wasn't going to have a chance of aerosolizing or leaving droplets on them. And so I sort of relaxed into it and just appreciated being held. And it put a piece of my soul back in place. And I had a similar moment in the hospital, even though it was much more, it felt riskier. It felt like a small fire had been lit, because I was with a patient for about 2 hours who had sort of been telling the same story circularly. And I felt like I'm not helping. I'm just sitting here. He is, expressing bitterness and anger. And I wonder if it's even good for him to continue expressing this, or if I should politely end the conversation. Well, thankfully, someone came and said, "You have a test now, sir." And so I walked with him and his bed to the elevator. And right before he went down the elevator, he took my hand and said, "Thank you. You have no idea what a difference you've made for me." And my initial instinct was to pull away, because I'd been told so clearly, do not touch someone else. because you are a risk to them and they are a risk to you. But in this moment, I balanced human compassion and I held his hand for a moment. Not as long as I normally would have, but I let it happen. And that was healing as well, because usually as someone in a caring profession, you know, whether it's chaplaincy or therapy or teaching or anything like that, you can relate to some of the struggles that people are bringing up to you, but you're not necessarily going through them at that exact second. So you can relate to, oh, I remember being a teenager once and having my heart broken. Or some people are able to say, I know what it is to lose a home to foreclosure, but this is one of the first times that all helping professionals, at least in my lifetime, besides perhaps 9/11, that all helping professionals are going through the same crisis as the people they're trying to provide crisis intervention for. And so I was feeling the loss of community and also a little bit of like a sense of being able to do my job well, because I knew we were all lonely and not really able to provide the same level of care. And it was also strange to see the country sort of become about as polarized as I've ever seen it, especially since in the past when great hardships happened, we were able to come together. You know, there are all the stories of people who survived 9/11 and it didn't matter what religion they were and it didn't matter what political party they were holding hands in houses of worship afterward because they needed to be together. And these may be romanticized images. I wasn't there. And yet the principle holds the same. Oftentimes in our times of greatest struggle, we gather. We gather for memorials for deaths. We gather at someone's door, even just to offer a casserole if they are having a hard time. And so not being able to gather in person while also watching us become even more polarized was just very difficult. And even now that I live much closer to home, I don't see my family nearly as often as I wish I did. And once I start working at my new hospital next Monday, I'm basically going to be quarantining myself until positivity rates are below 10%. And so that's hard because it's just one of these things where we know that it's right. And yet it is very easy to see it almost burn out the flame of community. Keeping that flame alive is hard after 2 years, which is so much of the reason why when I visit a congregation, I always ask, you know, what are people thinking about and wondering about and having trouble with? And I heard that it was, you know, just the sense of keeping together in the midst of things when Zoom fatigue is a thing. And so what do we do at this moment? Before I transition right into hope and lessons, I want to leave a space for people to, you know, share thoughts of grief and thoughts of loss. And kindly, 2 members of the congregation have agreed to speak out loud. But I really want anyone who feels called to share in the chat, and we'll read those as well. And so, Michelle, I would be delighted if you shared your thoughts.
I've asked myself, how does a group of people in a congregation stay connected as a beloved community during a global pandemic? A global pandemic that some of us, at least myself, thought were going to only last a couple of months. During this nearly 2-year pandemic, I've seen how it didn't just happen. During our collective period of isolation, this fellowship really pulled together. I'm grateful for our committed, compassionate minister and guest ministers, cards and phone calls from the pastoral outreach group, for our choir, the musicians, sharing circle, the humanist meetings, the worship associates, and various groups meeting via Zoom, all supported by, of course, I would have to mention a crew of unbelievable tech people who have taken on something that we could only have scratched the surface of 2 years ago. As I quarantined and recovered from a 2-month battle with COVID myself, UUFSB continued to be my lifeline, nourishing my spirit and my mind. We truly are a beloved community, caring for and uplifting each other individually and collectively.
Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. It's so important always to remember those different people who checked in on us when we were having our hardest moments, and sometimes still when we're having our hardest moments, because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's very easy for me to compare this to 2 years ago. Even though things have changed in some important ways, it's easy for me to think about that. And so I just love the mention of the people who have worked extra hard to make this happen, to check in, because I know for me, at least, it takes more effort to do something virtually than it does in person. And so to check in on you for 2 months while you had COVID is powerful. And to realize that y'all have been holding together for 2 years now, also very powerful. Shelley, would you please share?
I'm grateful that neither Tony nor I nor immediate family members became ill from COVID. And yet, the gloom that has hung over the world since the onset of COVID has sometimes left me feeling down, frustrated, fearful, angry, and seeing the situation as hopeless and helpless. However, the words of Edward Everett Hale have brought me comfort, and I hope will to all of you. They've inspired me to reach out to others, albeit in small ways, and that has made a difference. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do.
And there are some messages in the chat. It was such a difficult, isolating time and scary when we had no idea what was happening and no vaccines to help us.
Someone said to me, I'm not interested in any more Zoom meetings. For sure, you are not going to fix problems of isolation and community destruction with a Zoom meeting.
That's all we have for right now, Reverend Emmie.
Thank you so much, Shelley. And for those of you who spoke in the chat, Shelley, it's so important what you said about remembering that though we are one, we have one person's thing to give to this time. Because sometimes I'm struck by a sense of powerlessness with how long this has gone on, and remembering that I can't personal my responsibility out of the way of a global pandemic, out of our way, knowing that even if, I do everything right, I could still get COVID, as I'm sure many of you have experienced that same sense of, oh my gosh, how did this happen? And yet, when I sort of look to the world at large as being the place where most of the solutions need to come, from institutions bigger than us, it is so important to remember that we individually do have impact, and we are able to make our difference in our corner of our world, even if it's just by providing a calmer environment under our own roofs. And now some of the things that I've learned that I plan on carrying with me, because I'm not going to silver line my timing of a pandemic. I have realized that this isn't necessarily a time that I think should be silver lined. And there are little glimmers I've learned here and there about things that I never want to take for granted again. Because it's through human love that we are able to touch the divine. It's in many different religious traditions that people bear the image of the divine, of the creator, of God, whatever word that you use to describe that out there, which is bigger than us, which is real and the ultimate source. So when I look at my neighbor, I see something bigger than myself. And so it's through human love that we are able to experience that something bigger than ourselves. And this time has reminded me of just how much we belong to each other. Unitarian Universalists sometimes say that they're trying to build a house without walls. And so this time has reminded us to seek who is my neighbor and to really wonder and to realize your neighbor is everyone. And so in trying to figure out your own personal interactions and actions during this time, everybody is your neighbor. And so you try to retain everybody's well-being in your choices. And so we have to be responsible for each other. And our time together is so much more precious than I think any of us thought. I know that sometimes it was easy for me to be a little grumpy when I had to wake up Sunday morning and get to church. I don't work as a parish minister, and so I get to be just a congregant other than the times that I'm called upon to preach. And so sometimes it was like, oh, I don't want to go sit in the pews. I want to sleep in. I want to do whatever it is that I want to do. Bet you didn't expect to hear a reverend say that, but you're just going to forget that you heard that. And this has reminded me of why, for thousands of years, people have chosen to gather with people who believe similar things and who hold similar tenets to be true. And there's this part of Christian services called passing of the peace, where you go around and you shake hands. And I used to think that was so cheesy. It was like, can't we just continue on with the service? Like, I don't want to get up and shake people's hands. I'm tired. And now I miss that so dearly. I miss that like quick hug from so many people in the pews near me. And I'm never taking another hug for granted, especially these days as we feel in some ways similar to 2 years ago. I'm again in that situation where there's only one person. Well, during the first round, there was nobody that I was hugging, but now I hug my partner. And I'm so grateful for that. That even though he is the only person that I generally make physical contact with, that holds a universe within it. These touches, these hugs. And so just realizing that these everyday interactions are so much more precious than we ever could have thought, and that we should never take them for granted. And something that I've tried to do that I plan on carrying with me is practicing gratitude on my hardest days during the pandemic, to look for where, as St. Ignatius put it, where I felt consolation amidst desolation, so goodness amidst hardship. And so trying to practice gratitude, and I write a lot of cards, a lot of letters to people. And so when someone came up in my gratitude list, I tried to at least text them and say, hey, thinking of you, so grateful for you. So that's been one of my little creative ways to keep my community of close-knit friends to me. And some of you may have experienced a Zoom game night sometime over the last 2 years, where someone in your friend group or family who's good with technology has set up a little fun time for you guys. And I feel very fortunate because my partner was always an online gamer. And so he very quickly was able to sort of create a channel of communication for some of my closest friends and I. And we found a way to make that precious, even though it was weird not to be able to sort of like pass cards around a table or, cheers with anything. Just realizing like that was precious too. These are holy times. And I think a lot about why it is that we have chosen to care so much, why it is that your congregation has chosen to be only virtual during this time, why it is that we still pay attention, and why it is that many of us have gone and gotten even a third shot, which we didn't know we were going to need at the beginning. And I think about it in terms of taking care of the least of these and fighting for justice so that we no longer have a society that has the least of these. Thinking of our neighbors of color and people who work in blue collar jobs who can't go virtual, and people who come from low income families or high number of people in a household where it's basically impossible to quarantine. For people who don't have homes, there are so many people that we are thinking of during this time when we choose to do a costly action like go online, when we choose something that will be painful in some ways for ourselves. Just as I often wish that I didn't care as much, so I could just go in and hug my parents and continue having game nights in person or whatever it was, but just realizing that if we make it through this time living out our ethics and counting the costs of what it is to be a human being, trying to create a more just society, starting from ourselves first, that's where we can see some of that spiritual growth of believing in a long-term arc as we pay attention to short-term consequences and actions, knowing that there is more than what we can see here. Still believing that this pandemic will end someday, even though the date seems to keep getting pushed farther back sometimes. And just really allowing that sense of time, both the preciousness and the length of it, in order to pay attention to what's right in front of me, what is precious, what is good, what is holy, and to allow myself to grip a little bit more loosely the things that feel a little bit far away in order to have that long-term arc. That's part of my keeping the flame alive within myself, which I then bring to community that I'm part of. And certainly allowing myself to have feelings is a very important part of keeping the flame alive, because if, I don't know about you guys, but if I pretend to be great and happy and joyful when I am feeling only one or a few of those things, I don't feel like myself. And I think we need to keep showing up authentically, whether it's online or, you know, someday when it's safe again, in person. We gotta keep putting in that effort, just like Laura said, or just like Laura will say, my apologies. I'm very good at things sometimes. And so just part of our way of carrying the flame is standing on the side of love and sacrificing some of our everyday things in service of welcome, hope, and loving our communities. And so I'd love to invite Gil to share a little bit about what it is meant for him to keep the flame alive during this time.
Janet and I used to have lunch every Sunday after service with our daughter Darlene and grandchildren Simone, Edmund, and Gia. We did not see them in person for more than a year after March 2020, and only occasionally since then. This has been a great loss. Before COVID, our son in California and daughters in Illinois and Long Island with their families would gather with us for about a week once a year. We missed them completely in 2020. In 2021, they came separately without their families for very short times. Using Zoom, we now have monthly communication with what we call the big family. At check-in, each person gives a short statement about what's going on in their life. Then we have a program. Janet plays popular songs on the piano for sing-along, interspersed with family members singing or playing a song or reading something appropriate. They are joyous events. Separately, we meet with my brother and sisters once a month, at which we discuss a wide range of family history, political, health, etc. topics. We are getting to know each other better than when we meet in person because we are listening to each other. Our humanist discussion group has been meeting online in the evening on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. It has worked out very well. We have attendees, for example, from California, Minnesota, Florida, and the Adirondacks, as well as Long Island. While some attendees would prefer to meet in person, I prefer to meet on Zoom because I should not drive at night and there's less time needed for preparing for the meetings once I get to the fellowship.
Thank you so much for those reflections. I'd love to just lift up how important it is to have these different options for gathering, because there are so many people for whom online is better than in person, whether it is that they lack transportation or have trouble driving at night or whatever it is. These online sorts of things can be a lifesaver for folks, especially folks who are a little far away like Florida. And it's an opportunity to keep that community broadening. And I love what you said about how you're really listening to each other now. Again, I feel like we used to take things for granted of just, we'd sit across from each other and not necessarily really be there fully. And it's not like that's no longer a thing, right? There are so many Zoom meetings where I'm just like barely dragging on in it and I'm counting the minutes until it's over. But it's so just precious to realize these different things that can be so enriching in ways that we didn't necessarily expect. I would love to invite Linda to keep sharing on this topic. Linda, I think you're muted. Would someone be able to help her unmute?
Victory. Okay. In fact, one of the things I wanted to say was how frustrating it was initially with the technology when I could not get into a meeting, and I would feel more lonely than when than if I had not tried to get in. So technology is still sometimes a challenge, but in any case, and again, we've had wonderful, caring people in our fellowship who've helped us stay connected. The services also are interesting. It's not like, oh, I gotta go to church. It's like, oh, I wonder what the service will be this time. Music has always been very important to me and very important in our UU fellowship services, both listening to others and being part of the choir. Dan mentioned in a chat that even then we could not sing together. And when the hesitation in Zoom would cause us to sound like cacophony if we tried to sing together, that we would still meet. And occasionally we've been able to, through the magic of both Dan and technology, be able to still sing for the congregation. There are so many other ways that we can connect as a fellowship, through the sharing circles, the humanist discussion group, our yoga and book discussion groups, and number of us, either as pastoral assistants or because of the just kind people who they are, would outreach to people in the congregation, whether because maybe they live alone, like as I, or maybe have health concerns or whatever. But we've been able to keep connecting with people, and I think that's been very important. Also, the people who would not be normally attending because they don't live nearby or in a situation where they could get here, or anyway, that they are still able to be here. What I'm concerned about is people who are not either comfortable with technology or comfortable with Zoom, or maybe they just find other things. It's like you put a hole in the sand and it gets filled in. I'm concerned that there will be people who have a hard time getting back to the Sunday morning habit, and hope that they will feel like they can return and be welcome and still feel a part. So the connecting with people has been so important, I think, in whether it's in our UU community or whether it's to friends and family, still trying to keep connected through the distance. So I'm hoping that we can continue on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate that. I really love that you brought up that technology just isn't great for some people. You know, some people don't have a reliable internet connection or a computer or know how to use this. And so thank you for bringing that up, because even though Zoom has been such an integral part of my keeping the flame alive, it's important to realize not everyone's flame or community looks the same. And so, and I'm with you, it is interesting to imagine what the attendance will be like once you're able to be back in person. Will people have gotten used to being at home or doing something else during that time? And so it'll be very exciting, curious to figure all that out. And just again, celebrating that idea of getting in touch with people, especially people who we think may be most likely to be experiencing some community isolation. Laura, I would love if you shared your thoughts.
Well, I'm trying to look at this time as an opportunity for us as a community of faith to grow and move closer to the beloved community that we all want our congregation to be. And I can help while still respecting and working within the boundaries of pandemic restrictions, which I'm so well trained in as a nurse. Yeah, the going is rough now. I'll bet that for most of us, energy is lagging and the vision is getting foggy. But I really think that communities like this can be a lifeline. There's so much going on here, as Linda pointed out, even now, that each of us can find something to participate in that will nourish our bodies and our minds, and especially our souls. And in turn, our community becomes nourished as well. I see being part of a community, any community really, is a commitment. We all derive benefits for being a part of such a group, and with benefits come responsibility to the group in return. So I have a list, inspired, by the way, by listening to and working with many of you, for hanging in there and keeping my eyes on the long view. Be part of the process. Answer the call when something needs to be done, even when I think it's something I can't do. Actually read the newsletters and stay informed. Be open to learning. It helps to have a tech therapist, and you know who you are. Pay attention. Listen to others. Vote in our elections. Donate what I can to help us keep going. And keep on singing. Because I think all this has been more important now than ever. I just keep trying even when I screw it up or fall short, which I usually do. The chorus of the postlude from last week's service is stuck in my head. It calls to us, to each of us, with these words. Oh, children, don't you get weary. Walk together. Believe in the dream. When the way gets tough, we will find a new way. And let justice, love, hope, and peace roll down like a mighty stream.
Thank you so much. Community involves justice, and justice involves community. And so I love that image of them rolling down like a stream. And thank you for providing a set of guidelines that you've found really meaningful for you after the last 2 years.
We have a few other comments. The pandemic has made me aware of what is important. People are important, not things.
A Zoom story. I started doing choir meetings in the later spring of the pandemic. As you know, you can't sing in time because of Zoom delay, but we did hum together. The sense of connection was palpable. Several of us teared up.
These days, I'm telling myself, when in doubt, reach out.
I believe when we reach out to others in love, it spreads and has a positive effect. Whether it's someone on the grocery checkout line, on the phone, we have the effect we want to have. It's simple, but not always easy.
Though isolated, my wife and I have recently experienced the feelings of connectedness and love that come from being part of this caring community.
Of course, I prefer in-person services, but Zoom ones are very helpful when I cannot attend because of the pandemic or because I live 300 miles away.
Gratitude and appreciation.
When we were first starting to open up, when we were having both Zoom and in-person meetings, I got to the point that I couldn't remember if I had seen the person or not. Zoom has become the new in-person. I see and hear the person.
I had forgotten this feeling from early in the pandemic, but when I was in a situation where people had to social distance and wear masks, I was able to feel a sense of community in the fact that we were trying to protect each other.
Racial Concerns Committee is another community within a community.
Thank you all so much for your participation. I'm going to invite us to take silence for about a minute to continue to consider the question of what do you want to take from this time? And so even if you feel like putting a response in the chat and it's not read, know that it's being witnessed by your community and being held by your community. And so the question is, what do you want to take from this time? What do you not want to forget? Please join us now in singing a hymn written for your congregation by your very own Lee Morris, entitled Part of the Whole.
We join in singing together, my voice but one part. And while we're singing together, beating as one heart, and shakes up the soul. And pretty soon there are some other hands working, and another part of the whole. We join in growing together, my dream but one part. And while we're growing together, beating as one heart, somebody feels the growing, how the growing wakes up and shakes up the soul. And pretty soon there is another dream growing, and another part of the whole.
Our closing words today are by Julia Fehrenbacher, called The Cure for It All. Go gently today. Don't hurry or think about the next thing. Walk with the quiet trees. Can you believe how brave they are, how kind? Model your life after theirs. Blow kisses at yourself in the mirror, especially when you think you've messed up. Forgive yourself for not meeting your unreasonable expectations. You are human, not God. Don't be so arrogant. Praise fresh air, clean water, good dogs. Spin something from joy. Open a window, even if it's cold outside. Sit, close your eyes, breathe. Allow the river of all of it to pulse through eyelashes, fingertips, bare toes. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe until you feel your bigness, until the sun rises in your veins. Breathe until you stop needing anything to be different.
As you go into this day, may you go with gentleness and gratitude, even as you hold grief and hardship, for they can all be held at the same time. And during this time that sometimes seems like it's going to last longer than we can understand, hold both. Hold both and know that you have the hands to do so, for you will join hands with your neighbor, even virtually. And now, join me in singing a very familiar and wonderful song as our postlude, with a little help from my friends.
What would you think if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and I'll try not to sing out of key. Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. Yeah, I get high with a little help from my friends. Gonna try with a little help from my friends. What do I do when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? feel by the end of the day.
Are you sad because you're on your own?
No, I get by with little help from my friends. Yeah, I get high with little help from my friends. Gonna try with little help from my friends.
Do you need anybody?
I want somebody to love.
Could it be anybody?
I just need someone to love.
Would you believe in a love at first sight?
Yes, I'm certain that it happens all the time.
What do you see when you turn out the light?
I can't tell you, but I know it's mine. Oh, I get by with little help from my friends. Yeah, I get high with little help from my friends. Gonna try with little help from my friends.
Do you need anybody?
I just need someone to love.
Could it be anybody?
I want somebody to love. Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. Gonna try with little help from my friends. Yeah, I get high with little help from my friends. Yes, I get by with a little help from my friends. With a little help from my